The courtroom was electric. Every eye fixed on the center stage where Judge Amul Thapar leaned forward, his voice sharp as a blade. "Congresswoman Crockett," he snapped. "Are you seriously suggesting that the law you're defending is anything but a blatant overreach? Explain yourself." His tone wasn't just questioning. It was a challenge, a trap set to corner her, to break her composure. The air thickened with tension. Cameras clicked, whispers rippled through the gallery, and the nation held its breath. Thapar's reputation for ruthless courtroom tactics was well known. He thrived on intimidation, on forcing his opponents into a corner where they'd stumble, falter, and lose. But Jasmine Crockett was no ordinary opponent. She sat tall, eyes steady, voice calm but unwavering. "Your Honor," she began, her words measured but powerful, "this isn't about overreach. It's about protecting the rights of every American who's been silenced for too long." There was no hesitation, no flicker of doubt. It's just a quiet confidence that cut through the judge's aggression like a beacon. Thapar's brow furrowed. His next question sharper, more pointed. "Are you accusing this court of complicity in injustice?" That's a serious claim. The courtroom seemed to shrink under the weight of his words, the stakes suddenly impossibly high. But Jasmine didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned in slightly, her voice steady and clear. "I'm saying that justice isn't served by silence or fear. It's served by courage, and that's exactly what this moment demands." The room fell silent. Even the judge's usual smirk was gone, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. The clash was more than a legal battle. It was a collision of values, a fight for the soul of justice itself. And in that instant, it was clear this was no ordinary hearing. This was a showdown that would echo far beyond these walls. But what happened next left the entire courtroom and the nation stunned. This wasn't just another courtroom hearing. It was a battleground where the future of civil rights and justice hung in the balance. At stake was a landmark policy, one that could redefine how America protects its most vulnerable citizens, how it confronts systemic inequality, and how it honors the promise of equal justice under the law. The eyes of the nation were fixed on this moment because what unfolded here would ripple far beyond the marble walls of the courthouse. Judge Amul Thapar was no stranger to controversy. To many, he was the embodiment of establishment arrogance, a man who wielded his gavel not as a tool of fairness, but as a weapon to uphold the status quo. His rulings often reflected a cold, rigid interpretation of the law, one that seemed to protect entrenched power rather than challenge it. For decades, Thapar had built a reputation as a judge who intimidated dissenters, who dismissed the voices of those fighting for change, and who seemed to view justice through a narrow, unforgiving lens. Opposite him stood Jasmine Crockett, a rising star in the fight for truth and dignity. She was the new wave of leadership America desperately needed, fearless, principled, and unyielding in her commitment to justice. Jasmine's story was one of resilience and hope, a testament to the power of courage in the face of systemic oppression. She wasn't just defending a policy. She was defending the very idea that every person, regardless of background or circumstance, deserved to be heard and protected. This hearing was more than a legal proceeding. It was a symbolic clash between two visions of America. On one side, the old guard, clinging to power and privilege, resistant to change. On the other, a bold new voice demanding accountability, fairness, and a justice system that truly served all people. The tension in the courtroom was a reflection of a larger national struggle. Across the country, communities were watching, waiting, hoping what happened here could set a precedent that would either reinforce systemic bias or begin to dismantle it. It was a moment charged with the weight of history and the promise of progress, and yet, beneath the surface of this high-stakes confrontation was a deeper story. One that explained why this battle was not just inevitable, but necessary. To, truly, understand the forces at play, to grasp the full significance of this moment. We must look beyond the courtroom and into the man behind the gavel, because the real story of Judge Amul Thapar is one of power, privilege, and a relentless drive to maintain control. And it is against this backdrop that Jasmine Crockett's courage shines its brightest. But to understand why this clash was inevitable, we need to look deeper into the man behind the gavel. Amul Thapar's rise to power was swift and calculated. A story that reads like a blueprint for establishment success. He's born into a family of Indian immigrants. His early life was marked by discipline and ambition. But beneath the surface of his polished resume and impressive credentials lay a man whose judicial philosophy was shaped by a rigid worldview, one that prized order over justice, authority over empathy. Thapar's career began in the conservative legal circles of Kentucky, where he quickly earned a reputation as a tough, no-nonsense prosecutor. His courtroom style was aggressive, often bordering on confrontational. Colleagues whispered about his sharp tongue and unyielding demeanor. To some, he was a brilliant legal mind. To others, a man who wielded the law like a weapon, crushing those who dared to challenge the system. When President Trump nominated him to the federal bench, it was seen as a victory for the conservative legal establishment. Thapar's confirmation hearings revealed a judge unapologetically aligned with the hardline right, a man who viewed progressive legal arguments as threats to the very fabric of American society. His rulings often reflected this bias consistently, siding with corporations, law enforcement, and entrenched interests over marginalized communities. But it wasn't just his decisions that raised eyebrows. Thapar's courtroom demeanor was infamous. He had a habit of cutting off attorneys mid-argument, dismissing witnesses with a cold stare, and using his position to intimidate those who dared to question him. For many, his courtroom was less a place of justice and more a stage for his own authority. One particularly controversial moment came during a high-profile civil rights case, where Thapar's questioning of a young activist was widely criticized. As dismissive and condescending, his tone suggested disbelief that anyone could challenge the status quo, and his rulings seemed designed to send a message: dissent would not be tolerated. This pattern of behavior painted a clear picture. Thapar was not just a judge, he was a guardian of the old order, a man determined to maintain control through fear and intimidation. His courtroom was a fortress where power was preserved and voices of change were silenced. Yet, beneath this veneer of control, cracks were beginning to show. His arrogance blinded him to the shifting tides outside the courtroom walls. The nation was changing, and with it, the demand for justice that was truly just. Thapar's style, once effective, was becoming a liability, a symbol of a system increasingly out of touch with the people it was supposed to serve. And then came Jasmine Crockett. Standing across from Thapar was a hero forged in struggle and resilience. Jasmine Crockett's story is one of quiet strength born from hardship, a journey that transformed her into a beacon of hope for those who have long been overlooked and underestimated. Raised in a working-class family, Jasmine grew up witnessing firsthand the struggles of everyday Americans, families fighting to make ends meet, communities grappling with injustice, and voices too often drowned out by the noise of power and privilege. From an early age, Jasmine understood that the world was not always fair. But instead of succumbing to despair, she chose to fight. Her parents instilled in her a deep sense of dignity and resilience, teaching her that true strength comes not from dominance, but from standing firm in the face of adversity. It was this foundation that shaped her path, a path defined by unwavering commitment to truth, justice, and service. Jasmine excelled academically, not because it was easy, but because she saw education as a tool to break barriers. Law with a fierce determination, knowing that the legal system could be both a weapon of oppression and a shield for the vulnerable. Her years in law school were marked by late nights and relentless study, but also by a growing passion to use her skills to challenge injustice wherever it lived. Her early career was a testament to her character. Working as a public defender, Jasmine stood shoulder to shoulder with those the system had failed, people caught in cycles of poverty, discrimination, and neglect. She listened to their stories, fought for their rights, and never lost sight of the humanity behind every case. Her calm demeanor and sharp intellect earned her respect. But it was her empathy that made her a true advocate. When Jasmine entered politics, it was with a clear mission: to bring the voices of the marginalized into the halls of power. She quickly gained a reputation as a principled leader who refused to back down even when faced with overwhelming opposition. Her speeches were not just words, they were calls to action, infused with the lived experience of those she represented. This was no accident. It was forged through years of navigating systems designed to silence her and those like her. Her rise was not without sacrifice. She faced criticism, threats, and attempts to undermine her credibility. But each challenge only strengthened her resolve. Jasmine's story is a testament to the power of resilience and the belief that justice is not a privilege for the few, but a right for all. Now, as she faced Judge Amul Thapar in that tense courtroom, Jasmine carried with her the weight of her journey and the hopes of countless others who saw in her a reflection of their own struggles and dreams. Her calm dignity was a silent declaration. She would not be intimidated. She would not be silenced. As the hearing began, the tension in the room was electric, and the battle lines were drawn. The courtroom was charged with anticipation as Judge Amul Thapar fixed his gaze on Jasmine Crockett. His voice cut through the silence like a whip. "Congresswoman Crockett, your argument hinges on emotion rather than law. How do you justify this position when the statute is clear?" His tone was sharp, designed to unsettle, to force her into a corner where hesitation would mean defeat. Jasmine met his challenge with unwavering calm.
Your Honor,
she replied steadily. The law is not just words on a page. It is a living promise to protect every citizen's rights. Ignoring the human impact of these statutes is not justice, it's neglect. Her voice was measured, each word deliberate, refusing to be rushed or rattled. Thapar's eyes narrowed. You speak of promises, but the law must be applied as written. Are you suggesting this court should rewrite legislation based on public sentiment? His question was a trap, a test of her resolve. Without missing a beat, Jasmine responded. I'm saying the law must serve the people, not the other way around. When laws perpetuate inequality, it is the duty of this court to interpret them with fairness and compassion. Her words hung in the air, quiet challenge to the judge's rigid stance. The judge's usual confidence flickered for a moment, but he masked it quickly with a pointed follow-up. Fairness and compassion are subjective. How do you propose? This court maintains impartiality if it allows personal beliefs to influence rulings. Jasmine's eyes locked with his steady and unyielding. Impartiality does not mean indifference. It means recognizing the realities faced by those the law affects. Justice without empathy is blind, and that blindness has cost too many lives. Her voice carried the weight of experience, of battles fought and won beyond the courtroom walls. The courtroom murmured, sensing the shift. Thapar's aggressive posture softened slightly, a subtle sign that Jasmine's words were piercing through his armor. He pressed on, trying to regain control. You accuse this court of blindness, yet you dismiss the importance of legal precedent. Isn't that dangerous? Jasmine's reply was calm but firm. Precedent guides us, but it does not bind us to injustice. Progress demands courage to challenge outdated norms. That is the essence of justice. Her tone was resolute, a clear declaration that she would not be intimidated or swayed. As the exchange intensified, the power dynamic began to tilt. Thapar's questions grew sharper, but his composure wavered. Jasmine's steady presence was a counterbalance, her strategic responses dismantling his attempts to dominate the dialogue. Each answer chipped away at the judge's veneer of control. The courtroom was silent except for their voices. Two forces locked in a battle of wills. The judge's arrogance, once so imposing, now showed cracks. Jasmine's calm defiance was not just a defense. It was an offense, a reclaiming of the narrative. And then, in a moment that seemed to freeze time, Jasmine delivered a response that would silence the courtroom and change everything. Jasmine took a slow breath, her eyes steady as she prepared to deliver the moment that would shift the entire courtroom's energy. The judge's gaze was sharp, waiting for a misstep, but she was ready, not just with words, but with truth. The kind of truth that cuts through arrogance and silence alike. Your Honor, she began, her voice calm but resolute. Let's be clear about what's at stake here. This isn't just a debate over legal technicalities. This is about real people, families torn apart, communities left behind, voices silenced by a system that too often chooses power over justice. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The room was silent, every ear tuned to her cadence. Even Judge Thapar's usual smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. "Consider the data," Jasmine continued, her tone steady and precise. "Studies show that the policies we're discussing disproportionately impact marginalized communities. Black, brown, immigrant families, those who have historically been denied equal protection under the law. This isn't speculation, it's documented fact. And ignoring it is not justice, it's complicity." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Some leaned forward, captivated. Others exchanged glances, the gravity of her argument sinking in. Jasmine's words were not just a rebuttal. They were a reckoning. She pressed on, "Your Honor. The law must serve as a shield for the vulnerable, not a sword for the powerful. When courts uphold policies that perpetuate inequality, they betray the very principles they claim to defend. This is not about rewriting the law. It's about interpreting it with integrity. With an understanding of the lived realities of those it affects." The judge's eyes narrowed, but his confidence was visibly shaken. He opened his mouth to respond, but Jasmine was not finished. "Let me be clear," she said, voice rising just enough to command attention without losing composure. "Justice is not blind to suffering, is not deaf to cries for fairness. It is not indifferent to the pain caused by systemic bias. To claim otherwise is to deny the humanity of millions." The courtroom was hushed, the tension palpable. Even the gallery, packed with reporters and activists, seemed to hold its breath. Jasmine's words echoed beyond the walls. A powerful declaration that resonated with a nation hungry for change. Outside, social media exploded. Hashtags praising Jasmine's courage trended within minutes. Clips of her calm, commanding presence flooded timelines. Celebrities, politicians, and everyday citizens shared their awe and support. Hashtag Justice with Jasmine became a rallying cry, a symbol of resistance against entrenched power. Back inside, Judge Thapar's facade began to crumble. His usual sharp retorts were replaced by hesitant questions, his tone less certain. The courtroom sensed the shift. The once unshakable authority now visibly rattled by Jasmine's unwavering truth. She concluded with a final, piercing statement. "This moment demands more than legalese and posturing. It demands courage. The courage to stand for what is right, even when it's difficult. The courage to listen, to learn, and to lead with justice at the forefront." A beat of silence followed, then a swell of murmurs and nods. The judge's gavel, once a symbol of control, now seemed to tremble in his hand. Jasmine's victory was not just in her words, but in the undeniable power of her presence, the embodiment of hope, resilience, and unwavering integrity. The courtroom had witnessed more than a debate. It had witnessed a turning point. The aftermath was immediate, and the ripple effects would be felt far beyond the courtroom walls. The moment Jasmine Crockett's words echoed through the courtroom, the world outside erupted. Within seconds, social media platforms ignited with a wildfire of praise, admiration, and hope. Clips of her poised, unshakable rebuttal flooded timelines, shared millions of times by people hungry for a hero who spoke truth to power. The hashtag Justice with Jasmine trended globally, a digital banner rallying those who refused to accept injustice as the status quo memes, celebrating her calm defiance and razor-sharp intellect, spread like wildfire. Images of Jasmine standing tall, eyes steady, overlaid with captions like "Courage in the courtroom" and "The voice of the people." These weren't just viral moments. They were symbols of resistance, beacons for a generation demanding change. Celebrities and activists joined the chorus. Influential voices from across the political spectrum praised Jasmine's courage. A renowned civil rights leader tweeted, "Jasmine Crockett just reminded us all what true justice looks like: fearless, compassionate, and unyielding." A popular progressive musician shared a video clip, calling it the most inspiring moment in the fight for equality this year. Even politicians who had long championed reform echoed the sentiment, framing Jasmine's performance as a turning point in the national conversation about justice and fairness. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, with headlines declaring her the new face of principled leadership and a rising star in the fight for justice. Opinion pieces flooded in, dissecting her arguments and applauding her ability to dismantle the judge's intimidation tactics with grace and precision. Commentators debated the implications of the hearing, many agreeing that Jasmine's moment was more than a courtroom victory, it was a cultural milestone. Across communities, the impact was deeply personal. Social media was filled with stories from everyday people who saw themselves in Jasmine's calm strength. Immigrants, people of color, and activists shared how her words gave them renewed hope, a reminder that their struggles mattered and that change was possible. "She spoke for all of us," one tweet read. "Finally, someone who won't back down." The courtroom itself became a symbol. Footage of Jasmine's rebuttal was replayed endlessly, each viewing reinforcing the narrative of a David standing firm against a Goliath of entrenched power. The judge's faltering confidence was dissected and discussed, a stark contrast to Jasmine's unwavering resolve. But the ripple effect didn't stop at social media or news cycles. Grassroots organizations reported a surge in engagement, with volunteers inspired to take action, attend rallies, and push for legislative change. The hearing became a catalyst, sparking conversations in living rooms, classrooms, and community centers nationwide. Yet amid the celebration, a quiet tension lingered. The victory in the courtroom was undeniable, but the fight was far from over. The forces Jasmine challenged were powerful and deeply rooted. The establishment that Judge Thapar represented was already regrouping, preparing for the next move in a battle that extended well beyond this single hearing. The story didn't end with applause or viral moments. It was only the beginning. But the story doesn't end there. The true test of justice was still to come. What unfolded in that courtroom was more than a clash of legal minds. It was a battle for the soul of America itself. At its heart, this confrontation was a vivid reminder that dignity must always triumph over arrogance, that truth has the power to silence intimidation, and that service to others is the highest calling in the fight for justice. Jasmine Crockett's calm defiance was not just a personal victory. It was a beacon of hope for millions who have felt marginalized, dismissed, or silenced. Her unwavering commitment to truth and fairness showed us all what it means to stand tall in the face of overwhelming pressure. She reminded us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Judge Amul Thapar's attempt to corner her was a symbol of a system too often built to protect privilege and maintain control. But Jasmine's response shattered that illusion, proving that integrity and resilience can break through even the most fortified walls of power. This moment was a testament to the enduring American spirit, a spirit that refuses to accept injustice as inevitable and demands a better, fairer future. The lesson here is clear. Justice is not a passive ideal. It requires active participation, relentless courage, and a refusal to back down when confronted with arrogance or bigotry. It calls on each of us to be guardians of dignity, to speak truth to power, and to serve not ourselves, the greater good. In communities across the nation, Jasmine's example has sparked a renewed sense of purpose. It challenges us to look beyond our differences and unite around the shared values that define us: fairness, respect, and the unyielding belief that every person deserves to be heard and protected. This story is a call to action. It urges us to carry forward the fight for justice in our own lives. Whether that means standing up against discrimination, advocating for policy change, or simply refusing to accept silence in the face of wrongdoing, Jasmine's courage is a reminder that change begins with one voice, one act of defiance, one moment of truth. As we reflect on this powerful confrontation, we see that the true victory lies not in a single courtroom, but in the hearts and minds of those inspired to keep pushing forward. It is a victory for dignity over disdain, for hope over fear, and for the enduring promise of America, a nation built on the belief that justice is for all. As Jasmine's story continues to unfold, one thing is clear: the fight for justice is far from over. Judge Amul Thapar tried to corner Jasmine Crockett, and she shut him down instantly. But this wasn't just a courtroom clash. It was a powerful reminder that courage, truth, and dignity can overcome even the most relentless attempts to intimidate. Jasmine's unwavering stand showed us all what it means to fight for justice in a world that often tries to silence those who speak out. This story is more than a moment frozen in time. It's a call to each of us to stand firm when faced with arrogance, to speak boldly when truth is challenged, serve not ourselves, but the greater good. Jasmine's victory is a beacon, lighting the way for anyone who believes that justice must be more than a word. It must be a lived reality. If this story moved you, it inspired you to believe in the power of resilience and integrity, then join us. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that expose the battles behind the headlines and celebrate the heroes who refuse to back down. Share this video with your friends, your family, your community, because the fight for justice is a fight we all share. Together, we can build a movement rooted in dignity, truth, and hope. Together, we can ensure that voices like Jasmine Crockett's are never silenced. The road ahead is long, but with courage and conviction, we will keep pushing forward. Don't just watch the story, be part of it. Subscribe, share, and stand with us in the fight for justice, because when dignity wins, we all win.